Here we're going to talk about how to solve problems using the quadratic formula. And at first this might seem a little bit scary. The formula is on your formula sheet, but really if you just look through it and follow me here, you'll be able to solve these problems. So you're going to find, so here's what we're doing, the quadratic formula. So look at that on your formula sheet. You're going to be asked really kind of two problems where you're going to have to use this. One is where you're going to be finding the roots, and the other is they're going to ask you to find the factors. So if you get asked a question to find the factors, you're still going to have to find the roots. So regardless, when you use a quadratic formula, you're going to find the roots. A second step would be to find the factors, and I'll explain all of this. But before I do that, here the type of questions that we're looking at for this is something like this. You need to have a squared component. These are x's. So you need something like x squared, and you need an x in the equation as well. So, because remember, if you go back to the algebra video, if you have something like this where there's no x in here, it's just x squared minus 4, we solve this just through normal algebraic means. How do we solve this? And you can watch the algebra video because I don't want to go through it all now, but we would go x squared equals 4, you take the square root, so you have x equals, and it's going to be plus or minus 2. So normally we say what's the square root of 4 is 2, but it can also be negative 2 because negative 2 times negative 2 is also 4. Two negatives make a positive. So this symbol here, we call it the plus or minus. Really it's positive negative. So we say plus or minus, but really it means positive 2 or negative 2. Either one of those answers is correct. So x can equal positive 2 or x can equal negative 2. The shorthand is to write this plus or minus symbol, and that's the symbol that you're going to see in the quadratic formula. So remember, if you just have an equation like this, don't use a quadratic formula, just solve it algebraically. What we're talking about for the quadratic formula is when you have an x squared and an x in your equation. So here, let's first write out the quadratic formula. It's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, which means divided by 2a. So this means negative b plus or minus, so it's the square root of all of this. B squared minus 4ac. Remember, when you have things written right next to each other, that means multiply. So 4 times a times c, all of that divided by 2 times a. And so the last thing you're going to do when you're solving these is do this division. So you're going to get rid of all this first and then do the division. Now you might ask, what is b, what is a, what is c, where do these come from? And so the general form, remember, you're going to have an x squared and you're going to have an x. The equation is going to look something like that. It is most likely going to say equals 0. There's going to be a number times x squared plus a number times x plus a number. So the a is always the number that's in front of the x squared. So this a is whatever number's out in front of that. B is whatever number's in front of the x. So this b and that b come from this number. And c is whatever, this will just be a number. There's no x or anything beside it. And that's what goes in there. So let's say we have x squared plus 6x plus 8 equals 0. So what is a in this? A is the number in front of the x squared. Well, you can say there is no number, but really, remember, there's always a 1. When it's a 1 in front, we don't write it. So a just equals 1. So if there is no number, it's 1. What does b equal? B is the number in front of the x, so b equals 6. And what does c equal? Well, c is just the number by itself. C equals 8. So now we have a equals 1, b equals 6, c equals 8. So this you have to remember. You have to remember that this is the a, this is the b, and this is the c. This formula is on the formula sheet, so you don't need to remember this. But once you have a, b, and c, all you do is plug those in up here. So we just write negative b, so negative b, b is 6. Negative 6, plus or minus, don't worry about the plus or minus right now, the square root, and all of this is under the square root, so make sure you make the square root long. B squared, so that's 6 squared, minus 4 times a is 1. Remember when we write things in parentheses, that means multiply. 4 times a, 4 times 1, times c. c is 8. All divided by 2 times a. a is 1. So, now we need to simplify. Remember, simplify the top first before you divide. So, we have negative 6 plus or minus the square root. What's 6 squared? 6 times 6 is 36. Minus, what's 4 times 1 is 4 times 8 is 32. Minus 32. All divided by 2 times 1 is 2. So I'm going to come up here to finish this. So we have negative 6 plus or minus. What's 36 minus 32? 4. All divided by 2. Remember, do the top before you do any sort of division. What's the square root of 4? 2. Negative 6 plus or minus 2, all divided by 2. So now we get here, and so we have a plus or minus, is how you read that. So we're going to have 2 answers. So when you see something like this, when you're using the quadratic formula, you're going to get 2 answers. We have one which is negative 6 plus 2 divided by 2. So what's negative 6 plus 2? Negative 4 divided by 2. Negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. So that was negative 6 plus 2. Now we have to do negative 6 minus 2 because it's plus or minus divided by 2. What's negative 6 minus 2? Negative 8 divided by 2. What's negative 8 divided by 2? Negative 4. So your roots are x equals negative 2 or x equals negative 4. We got a negative 2 and a negative 4. That is your answer if you're being asked what are the roots of this equation. Negative 2 or negative 4. That's the answer. We're going to do one more example. We have 3x squared minus 5x minus 2 equals 0. So remember, this is A, this is B, this is C. So A equals 3. B equals, this is minus 5, right? So you need to make sure that you write the minus 5. And C equals minus 2 or negative 2. So make sure if there's a minus sign, you write the negative. Okay, then we're just going to plug this into the formula. Negative B, so negative 5 plus or minus the square root of B squared, which is negative 5 squared, minus 4 times A, which is 3, times c, which is negative 2, all divided by 2 times a, which was 3. What's negative negative 5? Two negatives make a positive, so that's a positive 5 plus or minus the square root. Negative 5 squared. Negative 5 times negative 5 is 25. Minus, what's 4 times 3? It's 12. Times negative 2 is negative 24. All over 2 times 3 is 6. Let's simplify this. So we have 5 plus or minus the square root. What's 25 minus negative 24? Two negatives makes a positive, right? So it's really 25 plus 24. 25 minus negative 24 is the same as 25 plus 24, which is 49. All divided by 6. 5 plus or minus. What's the square root of 49? If you don't know, you can plug it in your calculator, but you should know some of the basic roots. It's 7 divided by 6. We're going to come up here now. So again, we have two answers. We have 5 plus 7 divided by 6. What's 5 plus 7 is 12 divided by 6 equals 2. And we have 5 minus 7 divided by 6. 5 minus 7 is negative 2 divided by 6. And if you put this in lowest terms, you have negative 1/3. So your roots, x equals 2 or x equals negative 1/3. So that's how you find the roots. If the question is asking you to find the roots of this equation, it'll be something like this, equals 0. You pull out the quadratic formula, you figure out what a, b, and c are, and you just plug the numbers in. You're going to end up with two answers. Remember, when you get to this part where it's plus or minus, then you're going to have to do the plus, and then you do a minus. Now, what they might ask, instead of just finding the roots, is finding the factors. So you're going to have to find the roots regardless. But let's say they ask to find the factors of, if you remember our first example, was x squared plus 6x plus 8 equals 0. We had x equals negative 2 or x equals negative 4. Those were the roots. Now when they want to find the factors, what they're looking for is something that looks like this. You're going to have two parentheses with an x at the beginning. If this is negative 2, then you write this as a positive 2. If this is negative 4, you write this as a positive 4. Those are the two factors. The two factors are x plus 2 and x plus 4. And what they're really asking you is, so for this, how do you make this 0? Because it's really equals 0. When you have two things that you multiply by, when you multiply two things, how do you get 0? One of them has to equal 0, because 0 times anything is 0. So if we plug x equals negative 2 in here, negative 2 plus 2 is 0. So we get a 0 here. If we plug negative 4 into this, we get negative 4 plus 4. That's a 0. So we're going to get 0. But the factors are these two things. So all you do, if it's negative, you write a positive here. If it's positive, you're going to write a negative. The way you can check is plug it in. Negative 2 plus 2 equals 0. Okay, then that's right. So remember our second example we did, which was 3x squared minus 5x minus 2 equals 0. And we got x equals 2 or x equals negative 1/3. So the factors, again, just write write it like this. Write your two parentheses with an x. This is a positive 2, so you're going to write a negative 2. This is a negative 1/3, so you're going to write a positive 1/3. Because if you stick 2 in for x, because x equals 2, you're going to get 0. If you stick negative 1/3 in for x, you're going to get 0. So these are your factors. If you get asked a question for what are the factors of this equation, you have to find the roots first, but then you're going to write the answer like that.